Jen Psaki is a former political insider who worked on 3 U.S. presidential campaigns. She served as State Department spokesperson for John Kerry, White House Communications Director for Barack Obama, and White House Press Secretary for Joe Biden.
Thank you for joining us on this historic day. It's an honor to be here with all of you.
It's from that podium that Psaki took questions from journalists, sometimes shooting back.
I know you've never faced those choices, nor have you ever been pregnant.
These days, she gets to ask the questions as host of Inside with Jen Psaki on MSNBC.
How damaging and how dangerous are these threats?
And now she's written her first book, Say More, Lessons from Work, the White House, and the World. I asked her about those lessons learned over 2 decades in politics, Donald Trump, and her advice for Joe Biden. Jen Psaki, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you for having me.
You give advice all through your book about how to be a better communicator, all sorts of tips, including be a better listener. But one of the things you talk about is knowing your audience, knowing who you're talking to. And when I look at your former boss, President Biden, he is doing a couple of interviews over the past couple of weeks. CNN, he did Howard Stern, which kind of surprised me. I wonder, what does this tell you about the audience that he is trying to talk to right now?
I think the audience he's trying to talk to is one that is beyond the typical group of Americans who may be pressing refresh on whitehouse.gov or people who turn into every announcement he makes. When you're running for president, and of course, when you are president too, you're trying to expand your audience. So I think he did Howard Stern because that is an audience that is not the typical whitehouse.gov viewer, and he needs to speak to those people too at this point, just 6 months out from an election.
You started off your career, your political career, volunteering in Arlington. Then you got a job in Iowa, and reading about those moments. And it wasn't that long ago, but so much has changed in politics. Yeah. What kind of shift are you seeing inside the Democratic Party and sort of the larger political landscape if you look back at where you started just doing sort of door knocking?
Sure. I mean, there's been so many shifts. There's certainly been shifts on policy issues. I mean, when I was working for John Kerry and his presidential campaign in 2003 and 2004, we took him out and we found some slow pheasants so he could shoot them to prove that he valued the rights of Americans to be able to use a gun. Nowadays, that is so different. You would never see a Democratic candidate in the United States doing that at this point in time. There's obviously been shifts on gay marriage, on the importance of climate change and addressing that, on abortion rights, given the overturning of Roe. So there have been a number of policy changes. There's also been huge changes in how people consume information. I mean, not just here, around the world. And you know, when I was started in politics, when we walked around and door knocked with a Palm Pilot, it wasn't exactly advanced technology at the time. But nowadays, of course, people are consuming information, not just from 3 broadcast networks at night, not just from a handful of big national newspapers, but also from a range of social media platforms and from digital content. And if you're running a presidential campaign or you're in the White House, you have to be mindful of that. There are definitely challenges to that, for sure, in terms of how disinformation can travel and how you address that. But you also have to be mindful of reaching your audience where they are and meeting them where they are. And those options have expanded dramatically over the last 20 years.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the Middle East because it has become a dominant issue right now. Whether or not that holds for the election, I think is yet to be determined. But I want to ask you about the president's position on that, the idea that he is going to withhold weapons for Israel if they make this incursion into Rafah. How difficult is it for a president to draw a line like that, particularly when it comes to an ally like Israel?
Very difficult, but not unprecedented. I mean, this is something that Eisenhower did, that Ronald Reagan did in a similar capacity in some ways. And diplomacy is about escalating your leverage. So what President Biden has been doing in this case, obviously initially, he didn't hold back any support. He verbally did this privately and conveyed that this was a possibility over the course of the last couple of months. And the effort here is to make clear the United States has a very close and abiding relationship with Israel, but also to make clear that the tenor of this behavior, their aggressive action, and the potential that they're going to go into Rafah, a place where there's over 1 million people and reportedly more than 300,000 people have been trying to leave, is not acceptable on the global stage. And so that's what this is for. I don't know that I would call it a line. It's using leverage, which is a historic tool in diplomacy.
What is the relationship like between the president and Benjamin Netanyahu? Because they have both been around for decades, and I wonder how they are communicating on a personal level with one another at this stage.
Sure. They have had a long relationship, but a rocky one at times. And when Joe Biden was the vice president back in 2010, he went to Israel to have conversations with leaders there, and there was an announcement of settlements as soon as he landed. There's a history of a rocky and difficult relationship. It's also a direct relationship. And those are, as I obviously don't work there anymore, haven't worked there in 2 years, but what I saw when I was there was one where the president was not afraid to pick up the phone and have direct conversations with Netanyahu. Now, the other dynamic at play here is that Netanyahu, before the horrific events of October 7th, was very unpopular among the Israeli public. There were protests in the streets about his judiciary reforms. And he has his political survival in mind here. So he's not exactly waiting for Joe Biden to tell him what to do, or any president. That's also been the case through Democratic and Republican presidents here, despite the military support and leverage there. So that is a challenge if you're sitting in the White House right now, and certainly a challenge for President Biden, given the direct, close in some ways, but also rocky moments of their relationship.
You write in the book about the importance of giving feedback, and you say when Donald Trump withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, you wished some of his advisors would have said something, would have given him any kind of feedback. Why do you think Trump has, I mean, this might be an obvious question, but explain to me why you think Trump has surrounded himself with people who are not willing to give him that feedback?
Sycophants. I mean, more and more. I think there were more people in a first term that were willing to give feedback, and he was unwilling to receive it, clearly. Now, there were also people who were willing to give him feedback who didn't mind that he withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, which I think was an unwise policy decision for a range of reasons. But I think that's the risk here. A second term means more and more sycophants and people who just agree with you all the time. And to me, and I've worked for 2 presidents, obviously, as Secretary of State, lots of elected officials, a sign of strength and leadership is being willing to surround yourself with people who give you tough feedback. And you don't have to agree with them always. You're the president or the Secretary of State. But that is part of being a leader, is taking in and consuming tough feedback. And he's not looking for that. He's looking for loyalists. And that's actually quite dangerous.
In spite of that, and in spite of the criminal trial, the one that's ongoing right now, and other indictments, he remains successful amongst many Americans, that he's found a way to connect with them. And I wonder if there's a lesson there about how he communicates effectively, because he does seem to be successful, whether or not people agree with him.
Well, I think what's effective about his message, which I think is incredibly dangerous, is that it's simple and it's been consistent. He has always been the aggrieved. That has been how he has run, and he uses that message to connect with other people who feel aggrieved and let down by the government and institutions. And that is, as we've seen, a relatively large percentage of the population in the United States. He also has effectively tapped into nostalgia about the pre-COVID days as it relates to the economy. Now, that's not factually correct, but people feel this was a trauma, not for us, for everybody around the world, that people have gone through, and he's effectively tapping in on his economic messaging to that. The simplicity of it, the emotional connection of it, as dangerous and damaging as it is I think what is effective.
You, as you said, you've worked for a couple of presidents, the Secretary of State, and now you've got your own TV show, you've written this book. But I wonder if Joe Biden called you and said, listen, democracy is on the line, I need you back here, would you feel compelled to go back, because it was a critical moment for your country?
I would say, President Biden, good luck. I was honored to serve, but I love my job and what I'm doing now, and I'm retired currently from public service. I have said if at one time when I'm 80 they want to wheel me out, and 90 maybe, I have grandparents who've lived long, and have me be the ambassador in a warm country, I'm happy to do that. But the thing is I have had more opportunities to have a front seat to history than most people, and I've loved it and loved every moment. And I worked for two presidents who I admire, I respect, and I like personally. That's a gift. But I also love what I'm doing now. And, we are not defined by one job. We are all more than that, too.
Jen Psaki, congratulations on your book. Thanks for making the time today.
Thank you so much.